Hello students, today we are going to talk about extremes of intelligence. Intelligence is an attribute which is highly valued in human society. It is the global or aggregate ability of a person to think rationally, act purposefully and deal effectively with his environment. It is something which everyone wants to possess in a high degree. But unfortunately, intelligence, like many other human traits, is distributed unequally in the human population. So, today we will be looking at the distribution of intelligence, how it is distributed or dispersed in the human population, and we will be concentrating on the two extremes of intelligence, that is intellectual giftedness and mental retardation. The normal distribution is a symmetric bell-shaped curve that represents the pattern in which many characteristics are dispersed in the population. Most cases fall near the center of the distribution and the number of cases gradually declines as one moves away from the center in either direction. There are several hundred tests which are present in today's world to measure this wonderful attribute of human beings, that is intelligence. But there are many controversies also surrounding the measurement of intelligence. Whenever an individual takes an intelligence test, the test yields a measure of his intelligence which is known as an IQ or intelligence quotient. This IQ is used as a cutoff to make many decisions about people, and so it has many implications. So, let us look at how test scores or IQ scores are distributed in the human population. Intelligence test scores follow an approximately normal distribution. The scores on IQ tests are based on the normal distribution and the standard deviation. For most IQ tests, the mean of the distribution is set at 100 and the standard deviation is set at 15. Modern IQ test scores tell you where you stand exactly with regards to intelligence as compared to the general population. If we look at the normal distribution of intelligence, we will see on the low end IQ scores which are roughly 2 standard deviations or more below the mean, and these are regarded as subnormal. On the high end, individuals who score more than 2 or 3 standard deviations above the mean are regarded as gifted. These IQ scores are used as cutoffs and have several implications. For example, the cutoff for schooling is an IQ of 50. People feel that if a child has an IQ of below 50, he or she will not be able to do the work which is required in school. The cutoff for mental retardation is 70, and anyone scoring an IQ of below 70 is considered mentally retarded. For the diagnosis of intellectual giftedness, an IQ score of 130 is generally used, whereas some others use 140 as the cutoff for intellectual giftedness. Jensen has given us an interesting study in which he worked out the averages for various educational achievements. He felt that anyone who finishes high school and enters a tertiary institution has an IQ of about 105. A person with a bachelor's degree has an IQ of 115. An individual with an advanced postgraduate degree has an average IQ of 120. These are rough estimates which show that with education we can increase our IQ levels. Hollingworth has studied IQ and he feels that the optimum IQ score lies between 130 and 150. He feels that individuals who lie between IQs of 130 and 150 find it easy to learn and they are comfortable with what they are doing. whereas those who have IQs above 150 seem to have problems with their fellow people. If we look at the distribution of intelligence in the human population, we can see that roughly 68% of the population cluster around the average of 100 and their IQs range between 85 and 115. About 16% people have an IQ between 115 and 130, which is on the higher end, and another 14% have IQs between 85 and 70. Very few people are at the extreme where the curve tapers off, and we can see that approximately 2% of the population are mentally retarded and 2% of the population are intellectually gifted. So, there are very few people at the extreme ends, and these are the individuals whom we will look at a little more in detail. We will try to understand the concepts of mental retardation and intellectual giftedness. Mental retardation is a condition of limited ability in which an individual will have an IQ of below 70, not only intellectual functioning, but also he will have problems in adaptive living. These two problems should manifest itself before the age of 18 in the developmental years for it to be classified as mental retardation. Traditionally, mental retardation has been classified into 4 levels with corresponding IQs. These levels are mild retardation, moderate retardation, severe retardation, and profound retardation. What are some of the effects of mental retardation? Mental retardation affects all aspects of normal functioning. Children who suffer from this disorder will have problems in the academic area in all the 3 areas of reading, writing, and math. They will have poor social skills and will be unable to make friends easily, and also they have a lack of the awareness of social conventions. That is, they sometimes do not know how to behave in a social situation. They have poor communication skills and they don't have the ability to express their needs and feelings. Self-care skills are also poor and they often need help in eating, sleeping, putting on their clothes, answering a telephone, all the routine activities which we carry out every day. In the vocational area also, because they find it so difficult to learn, they may have difficulty in finding a job. Even if they find a job, they may not be able to retain the job because of all the lack of skills which they have in these different areas. The causes of mental retardation can be broadly classified into organic causes and cultural-familial retardation. Most of the cases of moderate, severe, and profound retardation have organic causes. These could be chromosomal and genetic problems, or they could be brain damage, or they could be due to the infections or toxin materials in the environment. Some of the genetic disorders include Down syndrome, Williams syndrome, Fragile X syndrome, prenatal malformation, metabolic disorders such as PKU. There are many diseases that affect the brain which can cause mental retardation in children. Most of these people who suffer from mental retardation have IQs between 0 and 50. Mildly retarded individuals do not show any visible organic cause for their mental retardation, and hence it is thought to have a cultural and a familial basis of origin. Their IQs range between 55 and 70, and their mental retardation is often attributed to growing up in a below average intellectual environment. Let us now look at a very interesting phenomenon, which is known as the idiot savant syndrome. These people who are known as idiot savants have very low intelligence, but they excel in one specific area. They have different abilities or talents, some of them, and the most popular being calendar calculation. Some of them have exceptional talent in music, spatial ability and mechanical ability. All these abilities are predominantly controlled by the right side of the brain. If we look and examine these idiot savants, we can see that they are not really creating something, but rather echo what they know. Most savants, interestingly, are male, about 6 for every female. The causes for this kind of isolated abilities could be biology, enormous amounts of practice, immense preoccupation with one skill area, and the learning of rules in a particular domain. The study of idiot savants has thrown light on intelligence and the extremes of intelligence. Now, let us move to the other extreme, intellectual giftedness. People who possess this attribute have enriched our societies over the centuries. We can list many people who are intellectually gifted. Two of the most well-known polymaths are Leonardo da Vinci and Aristotle. Both these had high intellectual ability, and this was shown in not one area but in many areas. They were good at everything that they did, not only good but they were excellent. We also have other genius, as people who have very high IQ are known, who have excelled in one or two areas. Some of the well-known ones are Beethoven and Wagner is in music, Picasso, who is a painter, the scientists Newton and Einstein, and Sigmund Freud, who is one of the best thinkers of the 20th century. Who are these highly gifted? Generally, the very highly gifted are those who score above 140 on a standard intelligence test such as the Stanford Binet or the WAIS. They also include child prodigies who excel at music or math or any other activity at a very early age. Children with extremely highly developed talents in unusual areas are also considered highly gifted. And of course, there are some who are profoundly intellectually gifted with IQs of over 170. Let us look at a definition of gifted and talented. When used in respect to students, children or youth, it means students, children or youth who give evidence of high performance capability in areas such as intellectual, creative, artistic or leadership capacity, or in specific academic fields, and who require services or activities not ordinarily provided by the school in order to fully develop such capabilities. This is the definition which is used in the United States to identify the gifted and the talented. There are many myths surrounding gifted children, and many people thought that they are not well adjusted in society. Let's take a look at some of these myths. Gifted kids are like cream that rise to the top in a classroom. This is not true at all. They need to be identified, or else they will get lost or remain hidden in the larger classroom. Gifted kids are so smart, they do fine with or without special programs. This is also not true because they require to be nurtured, and without special programs they may just lag behind and not be motivated to exhibit their skills. Gifted and talented mean the same thing. There is a difference between the two. They are not the same, one and the same. Another myth is that they need to go through school with their own age mates. So, some people felt that the gifted children should be given special education and they should be kept away from their normal age mates. But others feel that this is a very elitist view. But it is true that if you look at the very highly gifted, and if that person is thinking at the level of a 10-year-old and you put him in a class with 6-year-olds, he is bound to get bored. So, it is necessary that they be given special education or special attention. One of the first persons, the pioneer in the study of the gifted, is Louis Terman. In 1921, he started a huge longitudinal study in the US, which identified 1528 children with IQs ranging above 130. He wanted to study these children over a long period of time as they grew from childhood to adulthood and to find out the characteristics of these gifted children. The early findings demonstrated that these children were socially well adjusted and often skilled leaders. Unlike what was thought, they were average in height, in weight, and in physical attraction. He also found that they were more resistant to mental illness. And the myth that they are not well adjusted was busted. As adults, they typically were very successful and they earned more academic degrees and had higher occupational and financial success than their average peers. This was a seminal study and set the trend for further studies in the area of intellectual giftedness. This study is one of the oldest and is still running. Many studies were conducted on the family background of those who are intellectually gifted, and it was found, surprisingly, that many of them were raised in isolation away from their peer group. They were brought up in a diverse, rich environment with lots of books, interesting visitors, and a stimulating environment. Interestingly, they also tend to come from relatively liberal homes. One of the most interesting research areas is where researchers have tried to isolate the characteristics of the gifted children. There is a whole list of characteristics, and gifted children may exhibit one or many of these characteristics, and this shows that they are different from the normal child. The gifted are more independent and they are free thinkers. They believe strongly in their abilities, are prolific, producing enormous amounts of work like you could see in Beethoven as in music. They are risk takers. They have a sense of playfulness and an odd sense of humor. They are physically and emotionally sensitive and perfectionistic. This could lead to problems, but this is what also helps them to bring out exemplary work. Gifted children may frequently question authority. They also may have some trouble relating to or communicating with their peers. As children, these people often prefer the company of older children or adults. When we turn to see how they think and how they learn, they are very different from normal children. Gifted children are precocious and find learning more effortless than ordinary children. That is because they learn in a qualitatively different way than other children. They need minimal help and often make discoveries on their own. They solve problems in unusual ways. And one very dominant attribute is that they have a passion to master the area in which they have high ability, whether it is music, sport, painting, architecture, or any other ability. They display an intense, obsessive interest and an ability to focus which may not be there in other children. They also push themselves and nobody needs to motivate them. They are self-motivated. They demonstrate high reasoning capability, creativity. They are very curious. They possess a large vocabulary and they have an excellent memory. They are able to master concepts with very few repetitions. If we look at all these characteristics, we see that they are not evenly distributed throughout all the intellectual spheres. For example, a person may excel in solving logic problems, yet he may be a very poor speller. Another gifted individual may be able to read and write at a far above average level, yet have trouble with mathematics. Giftedness also may become noticeable or show itself in individuals at different points of development. The areas in which giftedness shows itself early in life is probably in reading and in math. Some others may show itself at later times of development. Several psychologists have sought to understand what underlies giftedness. One of them is Sternberg, and he has characterized giftedness as a collection of three things. He feels that gifted children have a better knowledge base and they think faster. They also have a superior ability to cope with novelty. And lastly, they excel at insight. What he means by insight is that these people are able to pull together a whole lot of information and put them together to form a whole. Another aspect of insight is knowing what is important and what is not, and this is heavily dependent on a large knowledge base. The last ability in insight is the ability to readily relate new information to what one already knows by using analogies or other means. So, Sternberg feels that the gifted children excel at these three things. Another definition of giftedness is given to us by Renzulli in his three-ring definition of giftedness. Renzulli feels that gifted behavior consists of behaviors that reflect an interaction among three basic clusters of human traits. These traits are an above average ability, high levels of task commitment, and high levels of creativity. Individuals who are capable of developing gifted behavior are those possessing or capable of developing this composite set of traits and applying them to any potential valuable area of human performance. Two psychologists, Bloom and Feldman, have studied talented individuals, and again they have found three important factors, that is, an inborn talent, which by itself is not enough. That talent has to be honed with a great deal of practice, and the individual needs to have a high motivation to succeed. When these three factors come together, we can see the full blooming of the talent or the exhibition of giftedness. We have now looked at some of the characteristics of the gifted and some of the explanations for what underlies giftedness. We need to identify such individuals and nurture this giftedness and talent so that they can contribute to the society. So, we need to do something special for them. Many interventions have been put into place in schools so that this can start early in the lives of the children. If we look at the interventions that are present in schools, they fall broadly into two categories. One of them is enrichment and the other is acceleration. In enrichment, the regular curriculum of the student is supplemented with honors courses, extra lectures, independent study projects and other special opportunities. But apart from that, the children spend time with their regular peer group and continue to be in class with them. The other intervention is acceleration, in which there is early admission to school, maybe even before normal children get admission into school, and as they continue in school to skip grades, that is to get a promotion to a higher grade earlier than the other peer group. In other words, in acceleration, these gifted individuals move through the regular curriculum at a rapid pace. Studies have shown that both these approaches, enrichment and acceleration, can be effective in promoting higher achievement. The study of giftedness continues. There is still a lot to be learnt about what makes an individual gifted. The Columbus group has given us a phenomenological definition of giftedness, in which they try to understand the inner world of the gifted child and to understand his external world from his point of view. So, let us look a little closely at this definition. Giftedness, according to them, is asynchronous development in which advanced cognitive abilities and heightened intensity combine to create inner experiences and awareness that are qualitatively different from the norm. This asynchrony increases with higher intellectual capacity. The uniqueness of the gifted renders them particularly vulnerable and requires modifications in parenting, teaching and counseling in order for them to develop optimally. So, this definition is a long-winded one, but it gives us a direction of how to understand the gifted child and what we can do as parents, educators and counselors to see that their talent, their giftedness blooms fully. Let us look at some of the elements in the definition. Asynchrony means being out of sync both internally and externally. We must realize that gifted children develop cognitively at a much faster rate than they develop physically and emotionally. This advanced cognition often makes gifted children aware of information that they are not yet emotionally mature enough to handle. They tend to experience life with great intensity, which makes them very emotionally complex. They usually do not fit the developmental norms for their age. They have more advanced play interests and often are academically far ahead of their age peers. So, the brighter the child, the greater the asynchrony and the potential for vulnerability. So, this tells us that we need to look at the gifted child in a different light. We need to understand what is happening in their inner world and how they are coping with the external world, which is different for them. So, it sets a roadmap for further research into this area of giftedness and for intervention programs which will make full use of this understanding of the world of the gifted. So, now we have looked at briefly at the one extreme of intelligence, which is mental retardation, and a little more in detail of the upper end of the intellectual spectrum, which is intellectual giftedness. The study of extremes of intelligence has thrown up a host of ethical and philosophical questions. Let's look at them and try to understand what are the implications of the study of the extremes of intelligence. One of the first questions we can ask is, how should a society deal with the mentally retarded? In the early history of the treatment of the mentally retarded, these children were kept in large institutions, especially the ones who have severe and profound retardation. And the conditions of these institutions were not very good. And so, in Denmark and Sweden, they brought out the concept of normalization or the principle of normalization, based on which they wanted to have fair treatment for the people who were suffering from the mentally retarded. In fact, in the 1960s, there was even a movement which sought to cure mental retardation. Now, based on the normalization principle, they speak of deinstitutionalization, putting these children into smaller homes where they can be given more attention. Another area is of how you should treat them, whether you should be paternalistic and try to look after them and make them dependent on you, or let them live in a least restrictive environment, give them equal rights, and let them fend for themselves with some support from us. Another area is of mainstreaming, where at least the mildly retarded can continue in normal schools with the normal students, and maybe by the time they leave school, they can overcome some of the problems of mental retardation. Should intelligence be treated as a national resource? Yes, many people feel that human intelligence is a national treasure, and what the government can do is try to raise average intelligence through education. They can have prevention programs where people come to know of genetic problems which causes mental retardation, identify and nurture talent so that they can come to full bloom, and also have a meritocracy where people are given jobs and based on their merit and not any other aspect. Another question is whether intelligence tests should be used, because this brings into play the concept of labeling children and people living up to these expectations. Test bias, where people from different cultures are not able to really do well on these intelligence tests. And another question is whether intelligence tests are really measuring intelligence, which is a very, very complex concept. The last question which we can look at is, can intelligence be raised? Yes, it can be in many ways, and some of the ways which have been highlighted are by increasing the knowledge base and trying not to teach children everything, but try to increase their knowledge in some areas. Also, teaching strategies for memory, reading, general problem solving and logic will go a long way in making people reach the top end of their intelligence.